And so as long as that's the case, I'm arguing that a rate cut, while it helps people, or it can be good for the markets, as long as the macro backdrop is holding up strong, can be good. It still won't necessarily be lower than the neutral rate, and therefore I think that liquidity will flow back into Bitcoin. And that could be Bitcoin corresponding to a break of new all-time highs. We could see Bitcoin do what it did in like 2017 around this time, right? So in 2017, Bitcoin had this drop to the 20-week SMA, it tagged it, and then it just slowly went up into late September, and then October, Bitcoin had a major breakout to all-time highs.
When the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, the market usually throws a party, but not all cuts are created equal. If the new rate still hovers above the neutral line, the rate that neither stimulates nor restricts economic growth, the liquidity backdrop doesn't change as much as people hope. In that kind of environment, capital doesn't explode outward. It rotates. Traders hunt for asymmetric bets. Bitcoin, with its fixed supply and high beta to liquidity sentiment, becomes a natural candidate for capital seeking a home. Popular Bitcoin analyst Ben Cowen picks it up right here. In his view, even a modest rate cut could reignite interest in Bitcoin, not because money is flooding in, but because the setup mirrors earlier bullish patterns. He points to 2017, when Bitcoin tagged its 20-week simple moving average, then crawled upward through September before erupting to new all-time highs in October. The signal wasn't loud, it was subtle, technical, and driven by shifting confidence in a resilient macro picture. The takeaway is clear. Don't wait for fireworks. The trigger might not be a crash or a flood of stimulus. It could just be a quiet rotation, a shift in tone, or a reclaimed moving average. When that happens, Bitcoin doesn't need to shout, it just climbs. Let's watch clips from Ben Cowen's latest market analysis to gain more insight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for additional in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the video.
Well, we are almost 2 weeks through the month of September, and Bitcoin continues to hold the bull market support band, right? So it bounced off the bull market support band as we got into September. We talked a lot about an August high and a September low. Now, obviously the question, which I certainly don't know the answer to for sure, right, is the low in September, is it on the first of the month? It absolutely could be, right? There is a chance that the low occurred on the first of the month, and Bitcoin is just rallying off of that. Normally, what happens in September for Bitcoin is it's a recovery month, right? Bitcoin tries to form a low and hold that low, and then by the time you get to October, it then likes to break into a new cycle high. So if you go back and look at just kind of the last few years, you'll see that in September of 2023, Bitcoin found a low. It started to climb through the month of September, and then in the month of October, it broke into a new cycle high. And then if you look at 2024, the low was in August, and then there was a higher low pretty early September. Bitcoin then rallied, but it did not put in an all-time high until we got into early November. Or at least maybe it got kind of close. Let's see. It got pretty close late October, kind of back up to the cycle high, and then early November, it ultimately blasted through. Now we have a very similar setup, right? You have this high in August, you have a low that's forming in September, and then Bitcoin is slowly working its way back up to the all-time highs. All right. Now, what's interesting is that while Bitcoin has held this, we've seen Bitcoin dominance go down. Now, if you've watched my videos over the last few weeks, I have speculated strongly that Bitcoin dominance should start to reverse course in the month of September, right? If you look at Bitcoin dominance, you can actually see in plenty of other bull markets, you'll see a Bitcoin dominance reverse course in September. In fact, in 2020, it reversed course at this exact same level, right? You can even see it right here. Bitcoin dominance found a low right about that late August, early September time frame, and then it started to go back up as September went along. Okay, and if you go to 2017, you'll see that Bitcoin dominance carved out a low over here in the month of September, and then by late September, early October, Bitcoin dominance was rising quite a bit. So I think the argument right now for Bitcoin is that, you know, you've had this bounce off the 20-week SMA, but it actually has allowed, I mean, during that time, Bitcoin dominance hasn't really gone up a lot. Now, a lot of people have reached out and said, well, why is Bitcoin dominance going down? Look, at the end of the day, dominance is still around the same levels that it's been at the last few weeks, right? And usually when dominance reverses course in September in bull market years, it's not just like a single day or a single week where it then reverses. It's a process where dominance really starts to form a low, and it keeps testing the same low, and then it keeps bouncing off of it. So obviously, you know, if there's a lot of altcoin speculation and a lot of people calling for alt season, and they keep going into alts, and then no matter what, Bitcoin dominance keeps holding the same levels, then there's a chance that as we get later into September, early October, that liquidity will just simply make its way back over to Bitcoin. And then if that plays out like it did in 2017, where dominance exploded into late September, early October, or like 2020, where dominance started to go back up late September, early October, then I think there's a good chance that will happen.
Bitcoin is quietly building strength this September, holding its key trend line even as most expect weakness. Historically, this month serves as a launch pad, not a collapse. A higher low could already be in, with dominance potentially forming a base, just like it did before major breakouts in 2017 and 2020. If capital starts rotating out of altcoins, Bitcoin may reclaim leadership again. The setup is subtle, but it's starting to rhyme with the past. October might come with fireworks. Let's watch more clips from his interview.
Now, there's a lot of people that have suggested, well, how could that happen if the Fed were to cut rates? The argument that dominance could go up after the rate cut is the same argument that we said last year after the rate cut, right? Last year, the Fed cut rates in the month of September as well. And what's interesting is when they cut rates last September, Bitcoin dominance is at the same level that it's at today, right? And what essentially happened back then after the rate cut is people thought Bitcoin dominance was going to crash, but instead dominance had a rally back up. And so I think you're going to see dominance rally back up to the upside after the rate cut, right? So in 2017, Bitcoin had this drop to the 20-week SMA, it tagged it, and then it just slowly went up into late September. And then October, Bitcoin had a major breakout to all-time highs. You see that? So that very well could be how this plays out. Just kind of a slow move up by Bitcoin back near the all-time highs. And then when it breaks out, you might get that final parabolic rally, or that final move into the theoretical market cycle top. That's one way it could play out. The other way it could theoretically play out is how it played out in 2020, which is also plenty of similarities, right? Where you have a low sort of in the first quarter or so, and then you get this rally. Let me highlight it here, right? So you get this rally off the low, you go sideways until the 20-week SMA nearly catches up, but then before allowing it to, Bitcoin gets another move sideways and then drop, and then a 2-week rally and then a 2-week drop, and then the rally into October, right? So there's similarities there as well, right? You have a move by Bitcoin up, and then it does not, it sort of goes down, but it does not allow the 20-week SMA to fully catch up. It then goes up, it then goes sideways, back down, and then it's got that, now we're kind of in that 2-week rally off of that. So, you know, whether it plays out like 2017 or like 2020, so 2017 would just be a slow grind higher from here to all-time highs. 2020 would be a 2-week pullback after the rate cut, and then new all-time highs. No matter how sort of how you view that, whether it takes the 2017 route or the 2020 route, ultimately what we saw in both cases, in both 2017 and 2020, we saw dominance soar higher after Bitcoin really started to get going. and broke into new all-time highs. So for me, I think liquidity should flow back to Bitcoin. I know Bitcoin dominance has been getting hit recently, but this is always how it goes, right? In August and September. The reversal happens sometime, usually in those months. It doesn't mean it can't grind those lows for a few weeks, just like we saw in 2020 at the same levels, and just like we saw in 2017 at slightly lower Bitcoin dominance levels. And what's interesting is in 2017, Bitcoin dominance, by late September was actually at 49%, and it still rallied to 71% by the end of the year. I'm not really saying that that's going to happen this time. There's obviously, there's stable coins and whatnot, but just because dominance is down, I would not necessarily count it out. Okay, and you can see that it's still trying to hug this trend line, still trying to hold support. Watch for dominance to break back up to the upside as we get later into September and early October. And, whether Bitcoin just goes slower from here through the rest of the month, slowly approaching all-time highs, or if it gets one more test of the 20-week SMA, it's somewhat irrelevant, right? Liquidity should ultimately flow back to the king by late September, and it should be obvious to everyone by October.
Bitcoin dominance is teasing a move that most aren't ready for. Despite dipping recently, it's hugging key support, as it did before explosive rallies in 2017 and 2020. Back then, a Fed rate cut didn't flood the market, but it quietly tilted liquidity back toward Bitcoin. That same setup is now unfolding. Whether we grind up slowly or fake out once more, the clock's ticking. If history rhymes, dominance won't stay quiet for long, and by October, it could catch everyone off guard. Let's watch more clips from his interview.
We are now 2 weeks in to Bitcoin testing that bull market support band. Remember, this is a very common thing that Bitcoin does in September of post-halving years. You can see that Bitcoin did the same thing throughout September of 2021. It also did the same thing in September of 2017. Now, normally, while Bitcoin finds a high, you can see in 2017, it found a high in August and a low in September. In 2021, it was the same thing, right? A high in August and then a low in September. And so that has sort of been our assessment here, is that Bitcoin forms that high in August and then forms the September low. Now, it's entirely possible, and as the month goes on, that the low was just simply the 1st of September, where Bitcoin wicked below all prices we had the previous month in August. In 2021, Bitcoin first went down to its bull market support band, got a little bit of a bounce, went down again, and then blasted off the last week of September going into October. But what you'll notice is that in 2021, Bitcoin did not hit an all-time high until the month of October. In 2017, Bitcoin found a low in mid-September, and it rallied up into late September, but it did not actually get to a market cycle high until October. So I still generally expect something similar to play out here, where either Bitcoin, just sort of slowly grinds up into, back near the highs and then hopefully breaks through in October. That's kind of if it follows 2017, just sort of a slow grind higher and then a breakthrough in October. If it follows 2021, or actually also if it follows 2020, you can see it got that move to 20-week SMA and then up for a couple weeks, down for a couple weeks, and then right back up. In that case, it also put in a new cycle. I guess it wasn't a cycle high because we went a little bit higher in November, in 2019, but in sort of after the pandemic drop, we put in a new high since the pandemic drop in October, right? So you can see that the August high, we had an August high, a September low, and the August high was actually taken out in the month of October. My guess is that this August high that we had in, just a few weeks ago, if it plays out, you would expect that high to be taken out sometime in the month of October. The only hard part is just figuring out what's the path there. Is it just straight up into it, followed by higher prices, or do you get a brief pullback first and then take it out?
Bitcoin is following a familiar September script, testing support, holding structure, and refusing to break down. Just like in 2017 and 2021, it printed a high in August, dipped early in the month, and now looks set to grind higher. The path forward may not be smooth, but history suggests the destination, a breakout in October. Whether it's a slow crawl or a final shakeout first, the setup is in motion. That August high? It's likely living on borrowed time. Let's watch more clips from his interview.
And you know what? The good thing so far about the month of September is we haven't even had to deal with the 50-week moving average, right? I mean, the 50-week SMA came into play earlier this year, and it also came into play back in Q3 of 2024. It didn't really come into play in Q3 of 2023. I mean, it got kind of close, but it didn't really tag it. So that moving average continues to go up. Right, and that actually is probably, I mean, it's now at around 98K, right? So the 50-week SMA continues to go higher. Worst case short-term scenario is we just give up the 20-week SMA, which right now, Bitcoin is still well above it. The bull market support band ranged from around 109 to 111. So we're still sitting, above that, which is good to see. And the reason that's a good thing to see is because in order to get the most out of hopefully a rally to new highs in Q4, in order to get the most out of it, we want to see Bitcoin hold this level, right? If Bitcoin does not hold that level and we go to the 50-week, it doesn't mean the cycle is over, but it could mean that you have to spend a little bit more time repairing, and then by the time you actually get to a Q4 rally, it just might be somewhat muted. So we're just taking this 1 week at a time. We're about halfway through September right now. We got a couple more weeks, I'm guessing, of similar price action where it's probably not putting in new all-time highs, but it's also, probably not just crashing and leaving everyone sure that the cycle is over either. So things should hopefully continue in this manner. We just get a couple more weeks. Hopefully we can get to the month of September without breaking down. Again, if we do, it's still not necessarily in. We still have that 50-week SMA that can come in and try to save the day like it has previous times. Remember, until we get weekly closes below the 50-week moving average, there's still reasons to be optimistic, right? Whenever you get those multiple weekly closes below that, then you have to face the music and recognize, all right, well, the cycle might be over at that point, but we're not there yet. I know a lot of people are curious about dominance. I'll probably do a video on dominance relatively soon, although all the videos are really about dominance. But when you look at Bitcoin dominance, a lot of times it forms a low in the month of September, and this very well could be the same thing. In fact, this is the same level. If you look at Bitcoin dominance right here, this is basically the same level that it found a low at in 2020 before it rallied back up, and then it also found a low in September of 2017 before rallying right back up. So I know a lot of people are losing faith on a final Bitcoin dominance rally, but I still think it's coming, and it should become more obvious probably after rate cuts, late September and going into October. I think dominance will go up quite a bit.
Bitcoin is holding its ground surprisingly well this September. It hasn't even touched the 50-week moving average, which sits far below current price action. That's a strong sign. Holding above the 20-week band keeps the door open for a full Q4 rally. If it breaks, there's still the 50-week trend line below to catch it, just like in previous cycles. Dominance is also sitting at historic support levels, hinting at a possible rebound. As rate cuts approach, October could flip the script fast. Bitcoin's volatility has collapsed to record lows, a classic setup for a breakout. Funding rates have flipped negative, open interest is rising, and futures positioning shows heavy short bias. These are the very conditions that often fuel short squeezes. Add a green September to the mix, and seasonality now leans strongly in favor of a powerful Q4 rally. This perfectly aligns with Ben Cowen's recent outlook. Bitcoin tends to form its base in September and move toward new highs in October. Technically, the price remains above the 20-week support band, avoiding deeper tests of the 50-week moving average. Meanwhile, Bollinger Band width is at its tightest ever, echoing pre-rally compressions from 2017 and 2020. Whether Bitcoin grinds or dips slightly before launch, history suggests the eventual resolution will be sharp and decisive. All signs, seasonal, technical, and derivative point in one direction. A major move is coming. As we wrap up, which past cycle do you think this one resembles more, 2017 or 2020? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.